Hi, my name is Jacqueline Crawford. I am an occupational therapy student here at the University of Missouri, and today in this video we are going to be going over a two-person dependent transfer. So I did a fieldwork rotation at a hospital on the neuro/neuro ICU floor where we use this transfer a lot. Typically when you use this transfer, the individual that you're working with and transferring may need some extra help to get up and out of bed, so that's where the two people come in. So a little bit lower in strength and whatnot. A couple things before we get into the transfer. I want to go over the environmental setup, a couple extra things that you just want to make sure you're looking at and making sure is okay just to be as safe as possible. So since you're going to be using this transfer with patients that have a little bit higher medical complexity, they're probably going to have different lines and leads. And we have a little IV pole right here that will kind of make do. But some tips and tricks is that you want to get an eye on all of the lines and leads the patient has. So that might be IVs in their arm, a catheter down here on the thigh, an arterial line. That would be really important, and that's typically on the back side of the wrist. And something else is some patients may have a trach or using a ventilator too. And that is typically your shortest leash. So we'll start, leash is in line or lead. So we'll start talking about that. Since that is the shortest line, you don't want to get the patient up and then all of a sudden the lines be really taut and not have a lot of slack on them, and then a possibility of it, the line or lead getting out of the patient or wiggling out. You do not want that, especially with catheter, arterial line, trach, literally everything. So since the ventilator will be our shortest line or lead, we would typically transfer towards the side of the ventilator machine. So if this IV pole is the ventilator machine, we would transfer towards this side and opposite to the other side. So the ventilator was on the other side, we would transfer towards the wall. And then, so we just want to make sure all the lines or leads are secure, have enough slack. The second thing we want to do is that since the patient is going from the bed to sitting on the floor, we want to make sure they have proper footwear on. Here you can see our patient has shoes on, which is great. Another alternative for a hospital is the hospital socks that have the grippies on the bottom. Something else that I really enjoyed using, especially with these patients that may have a little bit more effort on the therapist to get them up because of the dependent nature of it, is a transferring sheet. A lot of the patients that you're using this transfer with will most likely have a transfer sheet laying down. It's going to be on their lower back to about their knee. And it might have a couple bed pads on top as well, and you can just work with it. You don't have to remove the bed pads. So this will help reduce friction as we transfer them about the bed, but then also it's a great point of contact for the therapist to grab onto versus trying to grab different body parts of the patient. So we can grab on to the transfer sheet, and that's a great area of contact. The last thing that I'll say for the environmental setup is, since this is a lot of lifting, we want to make sure the bed is as high as we can get it, that it's still safe for the patient. So you can see the bed right now is on the lowest setting, and as a therapist, you would have to bend down quite a bit to transfer the patient. We really want to protect our backs and ensure we're doing body mechanics, so lifting up the bed will give you the greatest body mechanics and safety for the therapist and techs that are transferring. So I'm going to go ahead and move the bed up now. And I'm kind of measuring it with my hip. And I think that would be pretty good right there. That'll make it easy. Something else right now are rail guards are down. So they'll typically most likely be up like this, and there's another option right here to move the bed up or down. And we want to make sure they're up whenever we're moving the patient, just to prevent the rolling off and safety. But to push them down, we'll pull this out into a sit down. Okay, so now we're ready to transfer. One more thing that I'm going to mention for environmental setup wise is that the front therapist wants to make sure they have everything that they need for a session within arm's reach. So right here I have a chair for me to sit in, I have a gait belt, and I also have a washcloth for the patient to engage in occupation at edge of bed. So since this is a two-person transfer, I'm going to break down each role and then we'll put it together. So the front therapist, myself, for doing this transfer, I'm going to be in charge of the lower extremities. So when it comes time, I'm going to grab both of these legs and swing them over to edge of bed like this. So then the back therapist, she's going to use her 2 arms and grab the sheet that the patient's laying on. So one hand is going to be at each shoulder. And then when it comes time, she's going to lift the patient up using those transfer sheets, just like this. So we'll do that one more time all together. So this should be like one solid motion like this. And the biggest thing is communication is key. So since I'm the front therapist, I'm going to go ahead and take that lead and say we'll transfer the patient on 3. So it'll be 1, 2, 3, and then we'll transfer. Okay, so ready. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. So we swung the patient up, and now they're sitting edge of bed. A couple things I want to mention is that since I moved the legs first, so the legs got into position first, I came in close to the patient, put my legs in front of their legs, and then I also extended my hands just to help the back therapist or tech finish their motion of swinging the patient up, since it's usually a little bit more weight. So I want to come in and help them. Another thing about safety is that patients that you're using this transfer with, they may have they might need some help with their sitting balance. So we want to make sure the patient is safe at all times. So before any therapist kind of lets go, see I have one hand on here, I want to communicate with the back therapist to make sure that they have the patient. So do you have the patient?
Yes.
Yes. So I can go ahead and let go. An example of a patient not having the greatest sitting balance is that if we didn't support them well, they might go ahead and start falling back. So that's why I have a back therapist to stand back here and have hands on the trunk to navigate and correct any balance issues. The back therapist, if they feel more comfortable, they can get on top of the bed to be closer to the patient so their back is on their chest, or if it works best in this situation, the therapist can obviously stand on the opposite side of the bed. So right here, I still have my legs in front of the patient, and that is because if I didn't, the patient could start sliding forward, and then I would have to reposition and it'd be a headache, or the patient might go ahead and pick their legs out, which would cause the patient to go ahead and lean back, so making it harder for everyone. So I have the patient here. So now I want to check their feet. So her feet are not touching the floor, and that's mainly because we lifted the bed up so high, so it's easier on the staff to transfer the patient. So I'm going to go ahead and move the bed down. Okay, so now the patient, their feet are mostly flat on the floor. I'm going to scoot the patient forward a little bit, edge of bed, just to be super secure. So this is where communication really comes in handy. So I'm going to take the front therapist myself is going to take both sides of the transfer sheet, this white sheet. I'm going to tell the back therapist that I'm going to scoot forward the patient's right hip first. So I'm going to move it on 3. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. And that's when I just pulled on this sheet and moved that hip forward. If we needed to, we could tilt the patient over, leaving some space between her hip and the bed, and I can move it like that, which would make it a little bit easier. So I'm going to go ahead and do it on the right. Just going to move it forward. 1, 2, 3. Awesome. Just like that. Okay, so now the patient's secure, the feet are flat on the ground, and that's when I am going to go ahead and put on the gait belt and have a productive session.